What's up, YouTube fam? So we're back to talk about part two of Benoit documentary from Vice TV, Dark Side of the Ring, season premiere, season two, that aired tonight. So we're going to be discussing part two. You can check out my video that reflects on part one, since part one came out initially early on YouTube, and now part two aired on Vice TV tonight. And with season two, which I talked about at the beginning of, like I said in the first video, we talked about expectations about season two, and it's really, with this episode, what we're going to discuss, like this season two is going to be one adventure, because they got Owen Hart, they got New Jack, Jimmy Snuka, and like much more that they're going to be talking about. That little inside scoop, really behind the scenes story of each of those different people that are going to be highlighted. But part two of this Benoit story was it was something, but as you can see, my demeanor is a little bit different, and that's because I feel like there was something good that came out of this, and I feel like there was peace for viewers, as well as peace for two particular people. Well, more than just two particular people, but there was peace for people involved with this story. But again, I just want to make sure I put emphasis on that. Chris Jericho, who narrated this whole documentary, did an amazing job. And not only just his contribution and his perspective about this tragedy, but what he did ultimately for the people involved in this tragedy is just remarkable. I'm really speechless, to be honest, just to hear what happened and how he stepped in and what he was able to accomplish. So we'll talk about that. But again, the documentary was narrated by Chris Jericho, and he did an amazing job. But anyway, just in case you haven't seen part one, you just want to know what we're talking about here. So in 2007, wrestling superstar Chris Benoit murdered his wife Nancy's 7-year-old son, then ended his own life. Those closest to the tragedy had never spoken until now. So that's what, this 2-hour event highlighted, the ramifications of the tragedy, the people involved, and just the after effect and all that good stuff. But so again, I just want to be very clear as my disclaimer, I'm by no means is condoning the actions of Chris Benoit. The really horrendous actions that taken place by his hands. And with that being said, the guy, in-ring performer, is an amazing talent that is without a doubt memorable for the continued high caliber matches and instant classes that he's done throughout all the world, including New Japan, WCW, and WWE. His in-ring talent is remarkable, but what he did as the person, as the dad, and then the husband, is just absolutely horrific, unexcusable. It's absolutely tragic. So, but part two, while the part one focused more on his relationship and kind of the suffering from Eddie's death and him as the ring general that he was, part two more or less talks about why all of this happened. And you hear, about him as the husband, as the wrestler and the best friend, but it's all circles around like why did this all happen, or why did he do it? You know what I mean? And there's talks about CTE, and it's the really severe case of CTE he had for his age. And then obviously the word that I don't know if it existed before this, but it was absolutely slandered to this crime over and over, and that's roid rage, because a lot of people speculate that he was on steroid. I believe that they say in the autopsy his testosterone, which is a form of steroids, was at a very, very high rate. But nonetheless, the media felt that steroids was a big play into this. But so yeah, this part two really focused on the investigation side of the crime, and really laid out the chain of events Another person that was introduced into Part Two was Larry Alden, who's from Fayette County Sheriff's Office, who, he was the one that got the call. He said he had seen Chris around in the gym and so forth, but had never been to his house. But he got the call, and he was on the scene of the crime. And he kind of takes the viewers into, the investigative side, how things were laid out, the chain of events, and all that other good stuff. And then much more after that, we kind of find out when everyone found out and how they found out, including family, WWE, and friends and all that. And then really much the after effect that this really caused WWE and the media, and for them not entirely having all the information, how WWE gave a tribute to Chris Benoit the following night, when in fact they didn't have all the information, and they had to really retract all of that, because indeed this was a tragedy, not something to be glorified at all. They talked about the funeral and how the funeral was really private, and Jim Ross, who was a really good friend of Chris Benoit, was asked to leave, which is I just had no idea, because they felt like it was a work, and the work is really relatively a wrestling term, but it's the idea of that they felt like he was there just to show face as a sign of good faith from WWE, when in fact he did come on behalf of WWE, but nonetheless he was a friend of Chris Benoit and was asked to leave because they felt like it wasn't genuine. That's just and a lot of people didn't go at all because it's just because of what the crime was. It's it's the hardest part about this is we'll talk about David in a second, but they talked about Chris Benoit in a diary that he kept. The diary was something that this family gave for him to kind of get over Eddie Guerrero's death, but he actually started talking a lot about himself and writing a lot of really cryptic messages about death and it was a lot. And his family reading it, they showed his dad being able to read it and stuff like that. And it was a lot. That was pages and pages of stuff that he wrote in there. But it was such really like crazy to hear that WWE was not there for David, his other son, or Sandra, the sister of Nancy, after all this happened. I mean, truly, David and Nancy were victims to this. They were completely blackballed by the entire world because of what one man did to his family and himself, that the surviving family members were completely everyone turned their back on them. And not even just that, Sandra has had no relationship with the Benoit family after it had all happened, even though she tried in a failed attempt. And it's just, it's crazy to think that, the two sides of the family, knowing what everyone lost, still wasn't even able to come together until this all happened, which I said, Chris Jericho, I mean, just, it's absolutely speechless that Chris Jericho was the one to bring David and Sandra together, since the world had blackballed and turned their back on them. And he was the one to make them exchange numbers and they text, and then they talked for the first time upon trying to put this documentary together. So now that they have rekindled things, and they talk about forgiveness, and they spend a lot of time together, and they both are back enjoying wrestling, something that they haven't been able to do for a while. And it's remarkable. And that's why I said Part 2 of this story really gives its viewers peace. And it was a bright spot in all of this tragedy, because it was just a lot. And, and consequently of everything that's happening, even WWE since then, they had really locked down on their drug testing. The drug wellness policy is much more strict because of all this. And, this episode talks about the media influence about WWE and the speculations about the tragedy. And then they talk about the study of Chris Benoit's brain, that his dad gave permission for them to do the testing to find out about the severe case that CT Benoit had. And, Jericho making the lobby for wanting Nancy to be, a woman inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, but you can't even say Nancy Benoit, because you just can't say Benoit's name at all, because Benoit has been completely erased from the books of WWE, period. Even though his matches are still highlighted, still shown on the WWE network, there's no mention in text or anything of Chris Benoit. So This part two was just amazing. I think they did a really good job of utilizing 2 hours to really tell about a story that a lot of the people involved have never been able to talk to. And like I said, the good that came out of it is seeing Sandra and David being brought together, and it's really remarkable. But you definitely want to check this out. It's on Vice TV. As you can find it on the YouTube channel, and as well as you can check your local television channel to find out what station that they're on. And you should check this out because, like I said, season 2 is going to be wild because there's a lot more to come. But again, thank you for listening to my review and my discussion of this, and I hope you liked it. And let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll catch you for the next one soon.